Hello guys, welcome back. Now today, I'm going to be picking every single NHL team's worst draft pick over the past 10 years. There's been a ton of stars to come through the draft in the past 10 years, but there's also been a lot of picks that have been pretty awful too. So what are the worst busts of the last decade, and what are each team's worst picks of the last 10 years? Watch till the end to find out. How this will work is that I'll go for the 2009 to 2019 NHL draft to assemble the worst draft pick for every NHL team. We'll go for alphabetical order, so Anaheim all the way down to Winnipeg. We're going to jump straight into it, going to the Anaheim Ducks. And in my opinion, the worst Ducks draft pick of the last 10 years, I have Emerson Etem. He's a right winger, age 27, American-born guy, 29th overall in the 2010 NHL draft. He ended up playing 173 games in the NHL, getting 22 goals, 24 assists for 46 points. And yes, he was drafted 29th overall, but after the draft, he had a ton of hype, and he had a lot of hype behind his name. He was going to be a guy, maybe a first-line player in the NHL. That's how good he was looking like. And after that, once he made the NHL for a few games, he never quite gelled in the NHL. He was also a decent AHL player throughout his stint in the mid-20s, but after that, it was just nothing to be found. He went out of the NHL a couple years ago, went with the Ontario Reign last season for an AHL tryout, but for the most part, his career is pretty much over, especially his NHL hopes. Going on to a franchise that's had its fair share of meh picks overall, especially in the past 10 years, we have the Arizona Coyotes. And for my worst Coyotes draft pick of the last 10 years, I have Brandon Gormley. He is a defenseman at age 27 now, Canadian-born guy, drafted 13th overall back in the 2010 NHL draft, and Gormley ended up playing 58 games in the NHL, getting 2 goals and 3 assists for 5 points. Obviously not the best numbers. He's an AHL guy right now, but nothing too special, and 13th overall for a guy that, again, had so much hype behind him. The Coyotes needed a guy like that to finally develop, and obviously it didn't end up going that way. He had a little bit of a tough career, especially at the start of the AHL, and just never quite got going. Moving on to the Boston Bruins, and in my opinion, the worst Bruins draft pick of the last 10 years, I have Jakub Zboril. He's a defensive prospect at age 22, Czech Republic-born player. He was drafted 13th overall back in the 2015 NHL draft. At this point, he's played 2 NHL games with 0 points, nothing too special. And while Zboril still probably has some NHL games left in him, right now, he doesn't look like anything too special. Probably tops this guy at best for Boston. And in that 2015 draft, one of the best drafts at this point of all time, to go 13th overall and do nothing is a pretty rough one. Now, obviously, Boston got out and got Jake DeBrusk a couple of picks later, which does redeem it a little bit, but still, doesn't make it a good pick whatsoever. Moving on to a team that's had its misfortunes in the draft, going to the Buffalo Sabres, and for my worst Buffalo Sabres pick of the last 10 years, I have McNeil Grigorenko. He's a center at age 25, Russian-born guy, drafted 12th overall back in the 2012 NHL draft. He ended up playing 217 NHL games, getting 22 goals, 42 assists for 64 points. Now, he's a solid player, just not in the AHL or the NHL. He's an absolutely dynamic guy for the KHL, and that whole style fits that league perfectly. But Grigorenko in North America was very forgettable, and honestly, lackluster. Moving on to the Calgary Flames, for my worst Flames draft pick of the last 10 years, I have Emile Poirier. He is a left winger at age 24, Canadian-born guy, drafted 22nd overall back in the 2013 NHL draft. Now, Poirier ended up playing 8 NHL games, got 1 assist, which, I mean, is fine, I guess, but besides that, it was pretty bad. And Poirier, again, 22nd overall, it's not seriously high, but Calgary kind of had those picks late in the first round that never quite turned out, and Poirier was one of those. Again, the offense was never quite put together, and never put together really at the AHL level or the NHL level. Now, for the next team, we have the Carolina Hurricanes, and except for the last couple of years, they've had a pretty rough last decade when it comes to drafting. And, of course, their pick definitely signifies that. For my worst Canes draft pick of the last decade, I have Ryan Murphy. Defenseman at age 26 now, Canadian, was drafted 12th overall back in the 2011 NHL draft. He ended up playing 175 NHL games, getting 8 goals, 35 assists for 43 points. And Ryan Murphy right now is pretty much a top 4 guy in the AHL. He's an AHL regular right now, and that's fine. That's completely fine. But when you're drafted 12th overall, you usually have bigger expectations than that. And Ryan Murray never really fulfilled that. In the AHL, he never looked like a 12th overall pick. Even when he was after he was drafted, it was just all downhill from there. He is a decent AHL player, but nothing more. Going to the Chicago Blackhawks, and honestly, their draft record is usually pretty squeaky clean, but they had one that was a little bit of an exception. Now, for my worst Blackhawks pick of the last decade, I have Mark McNeil. He's a center at age 26 now. Canadian, drafted 18th overall back in the 2011 NHL draft. Mark McNeil ended up playing 2 NHL games, getting 0 points, and when it came to McNeil, pretty much after he was drafted, he had some expectations, but kind of like Murphy, ended up kind of declining a lot, and never got that NHL regular spot, really. And when it came to McNeil, he was never really spectacular in the AHL either. He was just fine, he was good, but nothing too special. Moving on to the Colorado Avalanche, for my worst Avs pick of the last 10 years, I have Duncan Siemens. He's a defenseman at age 25, Canadian, drafted 11th overall back in the 2011 NHL draft, and Siemens ended up playing 20 NHL games, getting 1 goal, 1 assist for 2 points overall, and Siemens was just okay in the NHL, when he was actually in the NHL, which was not very frequently. He doesn't have the greatest name either, it's pretty unlucky, and also his hairline is not good whatsoever, so I'm wishing the best of him in the rest of life, because he's gonna need it. Going on to the Columbus Blue Jackets, and for my worst Blue Jackets pick of the last 10 years, I have Sonny Milano. He is a left winger at age 23, American-born, 16th overall back in the 2014 NHL draft, and while yes, his career NHL-wise isn't exactly over, I don't think he's going to progress too much more. He so far has played 70 NHL games, getting 15 goals, 9 assists for 25 points. Not bad stats, but Milano, I think right now is suited for that AHL spot. We saw him finding another AHLer like a couple of months ago, not on the ice, but in a bar, so I don't know. He just is not the greatest vibe, if you're getting what I mean. He's just not the greatest player. And Columbus kind of made a mistake there. Moving on to the Dallas Stars, and if you guys know, the Dallas Stars are my first favorite team, so picking them as a Dallas Stars fan was actually pretty easy, and they had a lot of bad draft picks over the last 10 years, trust me. Now for my worst one, because there's a lot of ones, I have Scott Glennie. He is a center at age 28, Canadian-born guy, 8th overall back in the 2009 NHL draft, and he had wild expectations. Was looked at as one of the premier NHL goal scorers for the future, and didn't really become that. He played 1 NHL game, 1 NHL game, got 0 points, which of course he did, but never got that NHL opportunity. Was always in the AHL, and was just fine. He was never that great, never performed under that hype and that potential, which sucks, because he was drafted 8th overall, but he was looked at as a little bit of a steal too, because of how much potential he had. And the potential that he had basically went down the drain. Going on to the Detroit Red Wings, and a team that, over their franchise history, has been squeaky clean draft-wise, but they've had a couple of blemishes, and my worst draft pick for the Red Wings, I have Evgeny Svechnikov. He is a right winger at 22 years of age, Russian-born prospect right now, drafted 19th overall in the 2015 NHL draft. He so far has not been the greatest. He's played 16 NHL games, got 2 goals, 2 assists for 4 points overall. And when it comes to Svechnikov, I don't think he's a bad prospect because he's just a bad prospect. It's mostly been because of bad luck. This past season, he just missed the entire season because of injury, which sucks, and he already had a little bit of injury problems before this past season, so it's going to be interesting to see what he actually ends up developing towards. I don't know if he'll be a top 6 guy in the NHL. I don't think that's going to be really the case there. He might be a 4th liner, maybe 3rd liner, but right now, I just think there's a lot better picks for them. Moving on to the Edmonton Oilers, and man, the choices. Now, so if you guys know, they have some busts over the last 10 years. Nothing too crazy, but the biggest draft bust of them all is obviously Nail Yakupov. Right winger, age 25, Russian-born guy, drafted 1st overall in the 2012 NHL draft. And man, if Nail Yakupov does not signify that 2012 draft enough, I don't know what is. He was a bust, he was bad, he ended up playing 350 NHL games, getting 62 goals, 74 assists for 136 points. That's okay, but as a 1st overall pick who ended up going to the KHL in a few short years, only ended up playing 350 NHL games, that's straight terrible, and the Edmonton Oilers, in a terrible draft, made a terrible pick. Going on to the Florida Panthers, and for the Florida Panthers' worst pick of the last 10 years, I have Quinton Howden. He's a center at age 27. He is a Canadian, drafted 25th overall back in the 2010 NHL draft, and Howden had a pretty disappointing career in the NHL. He ended up playing 97 NHL games, getting 10 goals, 7 assists for 17 points. Now, he was mostly an AHL regular, never got that huge NHL chance with Florida, and went to the KHL for the last couple of years to kind of just round out his game. We'll see if he becomes anything in his late 20s. I'm not exactly sure of that right now. now. But when it comes to Quentin Howden, I liked him quite a bit back in his NHL 15 days. I was a pretty big fan of him, but honestly, it was a bust right there. And Florida obviously didn't help him develop whatsoever. And moving on to the LA Kings, a team that won 2 cups in the last 10 years, but is not shy away from their draft blemishes. And for my worst Kings draft pick, I have Gabe Vilardi. He's a center at age 19, Canadian, 11th overall back in the 2017 NHL draft. He has played 4 AHL games to this point, and right now his career is not looking good. Now, Gabe Vilardi, back in the 2017 NHL draft, could have been a top 5 pick. At 11th overall, a lot of people, including myself somewhat, thought that of a steal. And obviously it was at the time. It was a fantastic pick for LA, but since then, almost everything that can go wrong has gone wrong for Gabe Vilardi. He still is a solid prospect, but I don't have any hopes that he might be a top 6 guy in their future. And he's had a lot of back problems, unfortunately, in his short career. He is still 19, so hopefully he can get out of that. But right now, if I had to bet, I say he won't. Moving on to the Minnesota Wild, and a team that frankly has done a great job drafting in the last 10 years, has one pick that's very recent that I am not a big fan of, and that being Philip Johansson. He is a defenseman at age 19. He's Swedish-born prospect, 24th overall back in the 2018 NHL draft. And to this day, I still have no idea why the Minnesota Wild got Johansson at the spot he was in. He was at best like a mid-second round pick, and they went up to 24th to grab him. And he's not good whatsoever. He's not good defensively. He's not good offensively. He's just an okay prospect that might be an NHL player in the future. Might be a top 6 guy. And Minnesota took him in the first round ahead of a lot of guys that were awesome too. I'm pretty sure they took him ahead of Rasmus Sandin, which is not good whatsoever. Moving on to the Montreal Canadiens, a team that in the last 10 years has been a meh team at best in their first rounds. But when it came with our worst pick in the last 10 years, I had Nathan Beaulieu. He is a defenseman at age 26, Canadian, 17th overall back in the 2011 NHL draft. Now Beaulieu, outside the Canadiens, has carved out a decent NHL career. He has played 332 NHL games, getting 11 goals, 70 assists for 81 points, and that's fine, but I'm not a big fan of Bellew whatsoever. Offensively, he's very, very rough, and defensively, I don't even want to talk about him. So yes, he is an NHL player, and again, at 17 overall, that's not terrible, but again, you want to see a great player there. Montreal had quite a few options ahead of him too, so it wasn't the greatest pick, and obviously the teams after him are kind of wishing they didn't sign him either. Now, advancing on to the Nashville Predators, and honestly a team that has a great draft record over the past 10 years, I had to pick one, and I picked Austin Watson. He's a left winger, age 27, American-born, drafted 18th overall back in the 2010 NHL draft. Now, Austin Watson has played 253 games, getting 30 goals, 33 assists for 63 points, and when it comes to Watson, he's just an okay NHL player. I honestly liked him quite a bit a couple of years ago in the playoff run. Since then, he's done some questionable stuff that I'm not a fan of whatsoever, but even as an NHL player, he's not as good as you'd like him to be. At 18th overall in a pretty decent 2010 draft, he just was pretty meh. Advancing on to the New Jersey Devils, for my worst Devils pick of the past 10 years, I had Pavel Zacha. He is a center at age 22, Czech Republic born, drafted 6th overall in the 2015 NHL draft. And Zacha right now has played 201 NHL games, getting 29 goals, 47 assists for 76 points. And I mean, that's decent, but for a 6th overall pick, you kind of want to see a little bit more. Now, Zacha played a decent amount of games last year, was fairly decent on a middle 6, and I think he can be a decent player for the New Jersey Devils, but that's just the thing, a decent player at best. He's 22 years of age right now, so kind of have to prove himself in the next couple of years, but overall, things aren't looking amazing for Pavel Zacha, and for him to fulfill that 6th overall potential, that's pretty much gone at this point. Moving on to the New York Islanders, and in my opinion, the worst Islanders pick of the past 10 years, I have Griffin Reinhart. He is a defenseman at age 25, Canadian-born, drafted 4th overall in the 2012 NHL draft. Now, Reinhart has played 37 games up to this point, getting 2 assists for 2 points, and that whole pick would have been maybe one of the worst picks in this entire listing. It was one of them. And when it came to the New York Islanders, yes, they had a terrible pick there, but they kind of salvaged it a little bit. They traded Reinhart to the Edmonton Oilers in exchange for the pick that was Matt Barzal and Anthony Beauvillier. That's salvaging it right there. And honestly, when it comes to the draft pick as a whole, it's a terrible one and their worst one. But at least the New York Islanders were able to get something back. And Matt Barzal and Beauvillier ain't bad at all. Going to the team on the other side of town, the New York Rangers in Manhattan. And for the New York Rangers, worst pick of the last 10 years, I have Dylan McElrath. He is a defenseman at age 27, Canadian-born, drafted 10th overall in the 2010 NHL draft. Now, McElrath ended up playing 50 NHL games, getting 3 goals, 2 assists for 5 points overall. But that's not good. And for a 10th overall pick in a decent draft in the 2010 draft, that's not what you want. And for the New York Rangers, yes, they weren't in the greatest position, or I guess they were not in the rebuild position at that point. So it's fine, but you would like to see a better player at that point. And the options that they left on the table were pretty amazing. The Ottawa Senators, and in my opinion, the worst Sens pick of the last 10 years, I have Jared Cowan. He's a defenseman at age 28, Canadian, drafted 9th overall back in the 2009 NHL draft. And Cowan ended up playing 249 NHL games, getting 15 goals, 31 assists for 46 points. And Cowan, yes, had an okay NHL career, but when you're drafted 9th overall in the top 10 of a draft, you're usually expected to do a lot more than just have 249 okay NHL games. And that's exactly what Cowan had. Just top 6 minutes and just didn't do too much. But again, he's a decent NHL guy, nothing too special, but at 9th overall, that's a bit of a yikes by Ottawa. Now moving on to the Philadelphia Flyers. For my worst Flyers draft pick of the last 10 years, I have Samuel Morin. He's a defenseman at age 24, Canadian, drafted 11th overall in the 2013 NHL draft. Morin so far in his career has played 8 NHL games with a whopping 0 points on the board. And Morin in the past couple of years has pretty much been NHL scratch fodder, and that's not what you want to be known for at that point. And Samuel Morin, again, has been an AHL/NHL guy for a while, and at age 24, it's looking a lot too good for his NHL career. And that's a guy that might need to change his scenery, but I just don't think he's that good. And 13th overall in 2013 is a little bit of an ouch. And moving on to the Pittsburgh Penguins. For my worst Pens pick of the last 10 years, I have Derek Pouliot. He's a defenseman at age 25, Canadian, who was drafted 8th overall back in the 2012 NHL draft. He ended up playing 200 games, getting 8 goals, 40 assists for 48 points, and that was just a murderer's row of the 2012 draft. Just one of the worst drafts of all time, Derek Pouliot being a part of that, and obviously the Pittsburgh Penguins being a part of that. They couldn't escape that terrible draft, and Pouliot was a big cause of that. Now going along to the San Jose Sharks, and a team that honestly I had a hard time picking the worst draft pick because they've been so good draft-wise, especially in the past decade. But for my worst San Jose Sharks draft pick of the last 10 years, I have Jeremy Roy. He's a defensive prospect at age 22, Canadian, who was drafted 31st overall in the 2015 NHL draft. And Roy, up to this point, hasn't played an NHL game, but again, he's still developing. That's what the problem was there, because they had no obvious pick there. Roy isn't looking as good as he was projected. I think he dropped a little bit in that 2015 draft, went a little bit downwards, and at 31st overall, again, if he doesn't become an NHL player, it's not that bad. But San Jose, again, their draft record was so squeaky clean that I basically had to pick Roy, which kind of saddens me. Moving on to the Stanley Cup champion St. Louis Blues, and for my worst Blues pick of the last 10 years, I have David Rundblad. He is a defenseman at age 28, Swedish-born guy who was drafted 17th overall back in the 2009 NHL draft. Rundblad ended up playing 113 NHL games, getting 4 goals, 21 assists for 25 points, ended up winning a cup with the Chicago Blackhawks back in 2015 on their cup run, and that would scar a lot more, but St. Louis has their cup now, 2019. They're the Stanley Cup champions, and even though they made that mistake then, who cares? They won the cup. Moving on to the Tampa Bay Lightning, my second favorite team, and while they've had a fantastic draft record, they've had a couple of blemishes. Most notably, my worst Bolts draft pick over the past 10 years, Slater Koekkoek. He's a defenseman at age 25, Canadian, who was drafted 10th overall in the 2012 NHL draft. He ended up playing 107 NHL games, still with the Blackhawks. He has 6 goals, 13 assists for 19 points. And honestly, I'm just going Koekkoek for Cocoa Puffs at this point. It was a terrible pick, and again, in that 2012 NHL draft, which was very terrible if you haven't caught on, he was one of the bad picks, and yes, he is an NHL player right now, but not a good one. Now going on to the Toronto Maple Leafs, the team I'm repping right here. I'm not gonna lie, they've had some rough picks, so especially over the past 10 years, and while it has gotten better, it still does not hide the scars from a few years back. And most notably, the worst draft pick for the Leafs is Tyler Biggs. He is a right winger at age 26 right now, American, who was drafted 22nd overall back in the 2011 NHL draft. Tyler Biggs ended up playing 0 NHL games for the Toronto Maple Leafs, none. Not even for another team. 0 zip. whatsoever. And when it came to Tyler Biggs, he had an okay draft year, and then after that, it was not good whatsoever. I think last year he was playing in the EISHL or EIHL, which I think is in Ireland or something. I'm not even sure anymore. He's not that great of a player, never really was that great of a player, and Toronto for some reason back then was very stupid, and of course they took the stupid pick. Moving on to the Vancouver Canucks, and in my opinion, a team that's had some rough picks over the past 10 years. The worst one is Olli Juolevi. Now, he's a defenseman at age 21, Finnish-born guy, drafted 5th overall back in the 2016 NHL draft. He has played in 0 NHL games to this point. Probably will be an NHL player, but definitely not a 5th overall pick. Now, I'm going to give a bit of a disclaimer here because I love Finnish-born players. Behind USA, they're my favorite national team in hockey. I love them to pieces, but Juolevi was not a great pick, and for Vancouver, it's not looking too good. Now, I think with hindsight, obviously, it's easy to say that's not a great pick, but back then, Vancouver obviously needed that defenseman. They didn't have Quinn Hughes at that point. And Olli Juolevi, I don't think he was a 5th overall pick kind of caliber player, but still a decent one, probably especially a top 10 guy. So it wasn't a huge reach, but overall, Vancouver has not done a good job developing him whatsoever. Next up, we have the Vegas Golden Knights, and I'll pass. Now going on to the Washington Capitals, and for a team that has had many first-round picks and good first-round picks, it was a little bit hard to choose from. But for my worst Capitals draft pick, I have Lucas Johansson. He is a defenseman at age 21, Canadian. He was drafted 28th overall back in the 2016 NHL draft, but at this point, isn't looking like too much. He might be a top defense for Washington at best. Might get a little bit of a chance because Washington's defense is not the greatest, but overall, it was just not the greatest pick. Now, I will say, because Washington had so few picks in the first round in the past 10 years, it was hard to really gauge what the worst one was for them, but Lucas Johansson, I would say, is the worst. Again, he might not be even an NHL player, and at 28th overall, that's not the greatest. But going on to our last pick, we have the Winnipeg Jets, and for my worst pick for them the last 10 years, or I guess 5 years, I guess, I have Logan Stanley. He's a defenseman at age 21, a Canadian, 18th overall in the 2016 NHL draft, and he's taking his sweet time in his career so far. I think he started in the WHL, then now onto the AHL. He's just been okay. He might be a top guy for Vancouver or for Winnipeg in their future, but overall, I just don't like his potential too much. And that 2016 draft, a draft that had a lot of talent, especially in that late first round and early second round, passing up on those guys to get Logan Stanley is looking like a pretty big fail right now. But as you can see in this video, every single NHL team makes their mistakes, and even the squeakiest clean ones, the San Jose Sharks, even Jeremy Roy was not the greatest pick. So I guess it's a little bit of a life lesson there for all the children and even adults out there. Hey, we all make mistakes, and it's good to embrace who you really are. But of course, with this video, I need to hear your guys' thoughts down in the comments down below. So, let me know what you think about my picks for the worst draft picks for each team in the last decade. Let me know what you guys agree with, what you disagree with, and of course, the question on to you. What's your favorite team's worst draft pick over the last 10 years? But, if you guys want some more Grav videos just like this one, you can click on this card right here to watch my video on my ranking of every single prospect pool in the NHL. If you guys did enjoy, make sure you hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, and hit that notification bell if you haven't already. Again, comment down below your thoughts on my picks for the worst draft picks of the last 10 years, and who you think are the worst draft picks of the last 10 years. And I'll see you guys in the next video, or stream. Goodbye.